It was more. To be honest with you, it was moving without thinking. It was just
It
we
was
knew what we
such a
had to
part
do.
of your nature.
Yeah, and it was all hands on deck that were able to do it because there were so many that just could that wanted to but couldn't. And
Well, you're under half strength at this point.
oh yeah, absolutely. And Larry's in the let's put it the hospital, if you may, in our sick bay, uh, trying to help these guys keep their lives. He helped one sailor, tried to help one sailor. He was a postal clerk, John Spicer, and that's a very heartwarming story. And I'll let Larry tell him what happened. Larry, you know more than I do about it.
Well, Spicer was outside fighting a fire, and when the ship was still under attack, while he and Jeff Carpenter were out fighting this fire, and John decided to make a run towards the port side of the ship, um, and the Israelis sent a rocket through um, and caught him. Had shrapnel all up and down his left side, um, and we brought him into the uh, by the chief's quarters and tried to provide some triage. Um, we did mouth to mouth resuscitation. The uh, the corpsman, who was a third class at the time, did a tracheotomy on him to get a tube down in so that we could keep him
Breathing.
alive.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like 15 minutes, and then he was gone. We did all we could, but he was just too badly wounded.
But he
So
died rushing to go do more work, more damage control.
yes, yes,
And which is really kind of the story of the Liberty from the moment of the first attack was your captain's insistence upon constant state of readiness took a crew of over 200 people, watched that crew shrink down to about half of its full complement through injuries and death, and still that half strength crew was able to step up, not only provide and render aid to all of the other injured and wounded and comfort to those who were going to die or look like they were going to die, but also managed to keep that ship afloat, get it back under power, and get it moving away. Now, when you guys started to pull out of that area, what direction did you start to head as to were you headed towards the fleet? Were you headed towards another nation? What direction did you guys head? And what was, because everybody, and this is why I asked the question about speed earlier. 18 knots was kind of presumed top end speed, which would have, like you said earlier, would have had every one of the screws rattling. You steamed to Spain from the Ivory Coast at 16 knots.
No, what 16?
Right, initially.
Yeah,
Initially. You're not doing anywhere near 16 knots now at this point after you've been attacked.
no, the ship's leaning over like this,
Right.
and we got underway. We're doing 3, maybe 4 knots, 5 at the very most, if that much.
To
Because
give people an idea, you
How
could
big of a hole was in the hull?
well, that's debatable. Debatable. Some say 29 by 39. Some say 39 by 40. But it was a big hole, regardless.
that's feet, folks. He's
Yeah,
talking feet.
yeah. It's a big hole. In fact,
Imagine the size of the hole in the Stark when it was hit. That's about
well, in our weight room, there was about a 10-foot opening in the metal deck flooring. You could look through that opening, and you couldn't see any ship at all. All you could see is beautiful blue water from the Mediterranean. And I looked every which way I could to see a ship, and I couldn't do it.
So you guys are now steaming at about 3 or 4 knots away from the peninsula
In a
Which dir-
westerly direction.
in a westerly direction. So you guys are heading out of the Mediterranean and towards the Atlantic.
Well, we ended up in Malta, but
Yeah.
we just wanted to get out of the area. We had no
No communications.
no communications and no sonar. No, the compass was taken. The gyro was gone. The gyro compass. We were going by the stars.
And
You were going by
your
the
skipper,
stars and charts.
Yeah,
your skipper was injured as well, correct?
yeah. On his left leg, he had a large wound. I went up on when we were still under attack. I went to the bridge to see if I could help the firefighting. But yeah, he was wounded, but he was functional. He was in charge
And calm.
and calm and professional, very, very professional.
In fact, if I remember correctly, one of you guys said in the interview that I listened to that it was almost unsettling how calm he was able to remain in that situation.
Oh yeah, he wasn't yelling, he wasn't demanding. He was just
Didn't he at some point ask for a cup of coffee?
oh yeah.
Skipper, that sounds like your kind of habit.
Typical officer.
Yeah.
Well, so, and I don't mean to make light of it, but that, like, in hindsight, you look at a moment like that, and he looks at his aide and goes, "Hey, somebody get me a cup of coffee." What do you say to the old man? Like, "No, sir, I don't know if coffee is the right thing right now." You get the guy his coffee. So he's kind of, and he's not really taking any aid for himself. He's really watching out for his boys. And he wants to get you guys someplace where you're going to be safe, and you end up in port in Malta. And this is where you're like, at this point, you've been attacked by the Israelis. You all on board that on board that ship, everybody on that ship who's still alive. And by the way, if I remember correctly, of all of the sailors on that ship, with the casualties and the deaths, you didn't lose a single body.
Well, we lost some body parts.
Well, but not one person was left in the ocean.
Well,
I don't think that's totally true.
Okay, because I'm trying. I've heard some different stories that everybody made it back, even though you had death on that ship that day.
Well, they airlifted the next day. They airlifted all the people off the ship that were seriously injured and needed definitive care. Larry, did you depart the ship then?
No, I stayed because once we got to Malta, one of the more gruesome tasks that we had as communications technicians was we had to go back down into that flooded compartment. Once we got into dry dock, we had to go back down into those working spaces and recover all the casualties. The 25 men that Phil was talking about earlier that died instantly when the torpedo hit, and they weren't all together in one form. We had body parts scattered throughout the working area. So for
when a torpedo comes in, it's armor piercing and it's set to explode on the internal side of its target. It's not. People, for lack of experience, do not understand. Torpedoes don't blow up when they hit the ship. They blow up inside. They're designed to do that.
Typically. Now, this was a World War II type torpedo, though, and I believe it did explode as it hit the ship.
It did a massive amount of damage, obviously.
Right. Yep.
Well, it hit a steel I-beam initially going into the ship. It hit the steel I-beam, which I think prematurely
detonated it.
Detonated,
Mm-hmm.
and it blew it. I mean, it was still a huge hole, and it killed 25 men, and it basically destroyed the ship. but it only had to, it was one thing. The grace of God was right there with us. Nobody else was going to help us, but the odds of that hitting an I beam and having 5 or 6 torpedoes shot at you, you think we're the luckiest men alive?
No, there was some intervention there somewhere.
You bet.
Yeah, well, and not to mention the fact that it still didn't sink. I mean, 25 by 35 foot hole in the hull of a ship of that size is substantial enough that you would have imagined that it would have sunk, and you were able to keep that ship afloat. You were able to steam to Malta under the slowest of screw power. And didn't you guys tell a story too that at one point somebody was trying to get into a room and the security people, the staff inside of the room were like, "No, you're not allowed in here."
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, I was going to say because you were either you were under attack still, or you were on your way back, and you were like trying to get in to make sure everybody was all right, and you got told, "Screw off, you're not allowed to be in here,"
because they had a keypad outside their door, and I mean, you couldn't get in. And of course, I understand the security part of it, and I just told them, I said, "Hey, I'm in damage control, and I'll beat the door down if I have to, because I'm going to go anywhere I want on this ship. The captain just ordered me down here, so I'm getting in." And a few seconds later, they opened it up. There was nothing to see. I mean, come on. All there was chaos, and people, well, controlled chaos. I mean, it wasn't people pushing people out of the way or nothing like that.
Yeah.
Everybody was courteous to each other, but we wanted to help each other. Everything mattered to us.
Right.
But that's when I reopened the hatch very slowly. I heard the air coming through, and here comes a couple more sailors. And I really don't think anybody else was left down there alive. I pray to God there wasn't. I hope there wasn't. What do you think, Larry?
No, I think everyone that could get out got out, either initially or when you and Rick went back in and got a couple of more out.
So you in Malta, Larry, you go in and you do the job. You get out the remains. And
yes.
part of that was also securing technology, equipment, and information that nobody else can get their hands on. And you're right, that's a gruesome part of the job. That's part of the military, especially in communication security and intelligence gathering. There are times where you're going to have to step over the body. You're going to have to use the old military phrase, "suck it up and drive on." The job is sometimes even more important than the pain and the sorrow of losing teammates and crew members. You have to secure that information. You have to secure that technology. Yeah. And that was a tasking that you had to deal with in port in Malta, because you're not technically in a United States friendly. I mean, Malta's not dangerous per se, but it wasn't like you were in a secure naval facility. You still had information that needed to be protected and dealt with.
Absolutely. And we not only had to gather up all of the paper products that we had, access to for tasking purposes and for what we had collected. We also had to, secure the entire area so that the shoremen there in Malta could come on board to make repairs. So all of that had to be done. It took us about a week to gather up, the remains, to gather up all of the equipment and materials that needed to be secured, and secure that so that then their shore party from Malta could come on board and start doing their repairs.
Now,
in this time, go ahead, Skipper.
Oh, I actually have two questions, but one will be a follow-up. To your knowledge, was there a lot of media coverage on it?
No.
No, none whatsoever.
And the reason why I do that is because the follow up, later on that month is when the USS Forrestal caught fire and greatly overshadowed the attack that you guys sustained in terms of media coverage, and even still probably today.
Yeah, you're far more likely to find people that would be who aren't who aren't military history geeks or U.S. Foreign policy geeks like some of us are going to know about the Forrestal probably more within the average populace, because that was blown up, not blown up like, but in the media that was blown, that was like really out. Oh, look at this tragic accident.
Yeah, there
Well,
was a lot more media coverage and investigation involved in the Forrestal accident than there was for the USS Liberty.
And for
Um,
people and for people to know what, just somebody, one of the three of you besides me, because I've been doing most of the talking, what, just so people have an understanding of what the Forrestal was, what actually happened with the Forrestal and where was that?
well, the Forrestal was a carrier, and if I'm not mistaken, is that the one John McCain was on?
It was.
Okay, and you know what happened with that accident? John McCain wet started his jet. That's a hot dog thing to do. Ignited a missile on another aircraft, and all hell broke loose. They wanted to keel haul John McCain
And
aboard
they
that.
aren't the first people in the history of the United States that wanted to kill Hall
I
John
know,
McCain.
I know that. Believe me, I know it very well.
um, but there again, here's something that was literally, uh, for lack of better terminology, it was literally an accident. It was a stupid act by an idiot, uh, who of course got the title of war hero. Um, I should be careful. I'm going to end up Clinton if I'm not careful. Um, but and this gets all this coverage, like, oh, this tragic accident miraculously dwarfs the events of the USS Liberty. What's the time frame from the Liberty attack to the Forrestal?
I'm not sure.
Skipper, do you know
Um,
off the top of your head?
about 22 days.
So 22 days, radio silence about the Liberty. Family members have been notified that they've had loved ones killed underway, but no idea. There's been some, but like, it's still really shady and gray and being suppressed. And all of a sudden, 22 days later, we have this massive fire on board of a United States Air Force um, carrier, and we've got
Yeah, can I?
this cover up that's going on. But Larry, you guys, while you're dealing with all the stuff that you're supposed to deal with because that's your job, all of a sudden you guys are getting not just separated, you're not even getting really debriefed, you're getting barked at. You guys are getting pulled into rooms, pulled in mass by some big naval brass and others. Tell us a little bit about the start of the cover up here.
well, initially, Phil could tell you about Admiral Kidd coming on board and talking to his group. Mine was a little bit different. It was the same admiral caught about a half a dozen of us on the O1 level aft, and told us that we were never to talk about the incident. They were calling it an incident. That if we were to say anything, especially to the press or family or anyone like that, that we would be fined or imprisoned or both. Um, and when you're an E5, 21-year-old E5, and an admiral tells you to shut up and not say anything, that's what I did, and that's what most of us did. We
And
were
people do not understand. There was no such thing as a whistleblower protection back then.
no.
We didn't even know what whistleblowers were back then. Like, because you got told something, you shut up. It didn't matter.
Exactly.
What happened. You shut up. And that's what you just said there too, Larry, is I want people to understand. 21-year-old E5. Best case scenario, you enlisted when you were 18.
That's correct.
You made E5 in the Navy by the time you were 21. In the eyes of our society today, 21-year-olds are still barely adults. You've got a ship full of people, obviously some who were career Navy, who had been there for a while. But the majority of the people on that ship were not 15, 20, 25-year career people. It was kids.
Yes.
I mean, still more adult than I am right now. But this was a ship full of kids.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. They were all young men. I was 20 years old, third class petty officer when the ship got hit. But as Larry alluded to, with Admiral Isaac Kidd and his legal officer Ward Boston, I was in sick bay. There were four of us.
Because you were recovering too.
Pardon me?
You were
No, I was being interrogated there in a private room.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you had. I didn't know that part of the story.
I was wounded, but I was walking wounded. But
Skipper knows what that's like.
Yeah, but he got us in the room, and he had his stars on. He took off his lapel, and he threw them on the table, and it rang like a bell. It really did. He said, "Listen, I'm just like your dad," because he knew I was in damage control. He knew I saw a lot. He said, "Did you see the torpedo boats? Did you?" I said, "I didn't. I saw the torpedo boats. Yes. Did you see him shoot the life rafts?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "This is all good confidence. This is between us. I need to know everything so I can help you." And on
and at this
on
point,
and
you're
on.
trusting him.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he's kind of taken this everyday approach. He's come up. He's an admiral, and I don't. People need to understand. Admiral Kidd was an imposing figure. He was not just your He wasn't this weak-kneed career politician, military guy. This was a guy with some cojones in the military, in the Navy. And he walked in. He takes off his insignia of his rank. What was he at that time?
He was a 2-star flag admiral.
I was going to say he was 2-star, yeah. He takes that off, which is unheard of, sets it down and says, "Just talk to me like it's just us."
Yeah, and Ward Boston was taking the notes. So we went on down the line. I was the last guy he talked to. I told him everything I saw, what I thought, how come you didn't come help us, da 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 da. And he put his stars back on. He says, "Now I'm an admiral again. Don't you ever repeat a thing you said to me, to your parents, to anybody, your shipmates, anybody, or I'll guarantee you I'll see you in Leavenworth or worse. You know what that means?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." And he left. And I went nuts.
I'm going to point out here that Admiral Kidd's investigation took a grand total of 10 days. Now, we were talking about the Forrestal. The investigation into the initial investigation in the Forrestal took 6 months.
Sure. Yeah. This
and as we've learned over time, it's just so you guys are aware, if you're not hooked on our Veteran Nation show by now, you will be, because Skipper and I are just a laugh riot. We say all the time, when the military says it's going to investigate itself, it will investigate itself. And you know what it'll find after every investigation? It did nothing wrong.
Yeah. And in our case, Israel did nothing wrong. It was a mistaken ID, when in fact it was an act of war crimes.
It was literally a war crime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you shoot down an American flag or you shoot an American ship, you not only attack the people who are on that
You've
ship,
attacked sovereign American soil.
absolutely, and they did nothing about it because LBJ and Escol, the prime minister at that time, were in cahoots to sink us and blame it on a foreign country, and that country had been the Arabs.
And Phil, you're not just saying this because you're pissed off. Like, there's a history behind this. The more and more and more we get removed from these events, and the more people are able to look, you can see strings and threads and puzzle pieces either falling together or pulling up things apart that show this massive move to keep these countries at war and to suck the United States into every single engagement that they can. And this is why this conversation is so important to me on my channel. And even, and there are reasons why it's important to the Veteran Nation program. But for me, what I want people to understand is anytime you hear a story like what happened with the Liberty, there is something going on, and there will be a cover-up that will victimize the people who have already been victimized. And I don't use that term to imply weakness on the part of you and your shipmates, but you were victimized to promote something and to propagate something, and that is the ever rolling perpetual war machine that the United States needs to be part of. And we see that playing out now in the Ukraine. Nothing's changed. We didn't learn anything from the Liberty. They're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and they will. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll also.
No,
I was
Phil,
just going to add that this was the same administration that did the Gulf of Tonkin incident. McNamara, Rusk, Johnson, all the same individuals.
Yeah, the Gulf of Tonkin. Funny enough, I ended up on my last duty station was on the USS Maddox, DD 731, when the Gulf of Tonkin incident, quote unquote, was supposed to happen. I talked to guys aboard the ship that were still there at that time and said it was old BS. So here we got LBJ gets us in a war, 58,000 brave Americans murdered, slaughtered for what? Okay, here we get into the Twin Towers. Okay, Bush wants to go to war with Iraq, WMD, no WMDs. It's just a perpetual war that people like us that put our hand up to this country because we love our country, we took an oath to defend it, are sent there to die so these politicians can have their way, their cocktail parties, and live in their ivory towers. And it's about damn time that they do their job, and we're alive. Us survivors are here alive, eyewitnesses to tell these people, do not take the Israeli side. When they did an investigation, they didn't take our side. They took the Israeli side and what they said. Now that is totally absurd, and our country's still covering it up. They're all guilty of war crimes and covering up an act of murder by the United States. And it's just like being raped. We got raped. We know who raped us, the Israelis, and our American government photographed it and hid all the records and told us to shut up. Now, I'm fired up, and it should fire everybody up.
I do want to point out for people who would deny that there's any type of cover-up, the USS Liberty, now this happened in 1967. By 1970, the ship was already gone, sold for scrap, taken apart. Again, I'm just drawing comparisons to the Forrestal because they happened at about the same time. The Forrestal stayed in service all the way up until 1983. It was completely just redone. And normally when you have these type of incidents, you keep the damage because there's going to be an initial investigation. There's probably going to be a follow-on investigation, and there's also going to be a safety investigation.
This is why we have Skipper on, because he's an officer and he thinks like a dunderhead.
Well, hey, Larry's an officer too. He's a warrant officer. So we
got sorry, Larry. I didn't mean to. Well, no, wait. Warrant officers are cool. Commissioned officers are just a pain in the ass. So, you guys, all of you, are getting. When Larry. Okay, so Larry's back. All right. So, you're all right, Larry. You gotta. She making you lunch?
No, we've got some blinds people here coming to give us an estimate for our sunroom. So they wanted to show us samples, and I didn't
And you.
realize it was going to be an hour and a half or 2 hours for the program. So
Well, I wanted everybody to hear this. So Larry, if you got to go, let's focus on this. You got the kind of the same speech that everybody else did. You kind of were told it's zip it, keep it shut, don't talk about this to anybody,
yes,
because
correct.
that went out to everyone.
It did, and it not only happened to us on board the ship, but when I got relieved at Malta and sent back to Norfolk, Virginia, I had a lieutenant commander there come in and basically dress me down again and say, "You're never to talk about this to anyone. It was an accident. Just, forget it ever happened." And one thing about being a, cryptologic or communications technician is that, I was always dealing with classified information. So if someone told you to keep a secret, you kept a secret. And that's basically what this was. But I mean, for me, it was something that I suppressed for over 50 years because I didn't know whether or not, I was going to be in danger of being threatened for imprisonment or fines or both. And
But you guys have launched an organization.
Yes.
Because of all of this, to try and get other people to come out and tell your story, to put pressure on Congress, to put pressure on the DoD, on the Department of the Navy, on politicians and other elected servants and public servants of other types to come out and start being transparent and telling the truth on this. And so you guys have started an organization, and the very organizations that should be on your side in this have also started to ice you out.